So what is pericarp? Pericarp is the external covering of the fruit. Cotyledons, they play a very important role. Why? Because the cotyledon protects this particular region of the plumule and the radicle in a younger seed. So actinomorphic flower means the flower can be cut into equal halves in any plane. So the coleoptile, it is a protective covering of the plumule, and the coleorhiza is a protective covering of the radical regions. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to another session on chapter 5, that is Morphology of Flowering Plants. I'm Dr. Divya, Biology Faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous session, we had studied about the arrangement of flowers and the way the petals are arranged, that is nothing but aestivation. We had studied about the different aestivations, that is valvate, imbricate, twisted and vexillary or papillonaceous aestivation. So in today's session, we shall study about the next important part of the flowering plant, that is the seed. And also we shall study about the fruit. And also we shall take a look into the different symbols that are used in order to describe a flower. So we shall start. So first, moving on to fruit. So if you remember, in my previous sessions, I had told you that the fruit is formed from the ovary and the seed is formed from the ovule. So when we look at the fruit, there are different parts. So like how the seed has different parts, that is the outer covering, which is the seed coat and all that. Just like that, the fruit also has parts, which is epicarp. So epicarp. So carp is something related to the female reproductive part, that is the carpel. So therefore carp is nothing but a fruit. So epicarp, that is the outer covering of the fruit. So the outer skin of the fruit, it is called as the epicarp, and this epicarp usually it is leathery, and also in some of the plant species the epicarp as well as the mesocarp, they will be fused. And one more part of the fruit is the mesocarp. So mesocarp is the most fleshy and the juicy part of the fruit that we consume. So if I take the example of a mango here, so the outer skin, it is the epicarp, and the inner fleshy part that we usually consume, which is yellow in color or orange in color, it is the mesocarp. So mesocarp is the middle layer. Meso means middle. So mesocarp, it is fleshy and is the edible part of the fruit. So next, moving on to the endocarp. So inner to the mesocarp is present a layer which is called as the endocarp. So endocarp is nothing but the inner stony wall. So if you consider a mango fruit, the seed will be covered by one stony layer or a hard layer. So that layer is nothing but the endocarp. So the fruit is mainly made up of one important structure called as pericarp. So what is pericarp? Pericarp is the external covering of the fruit, and the pericarp is made up of the epicarp, which forms the outer skin of the fruit, and it forms the mesocarp, which forms the fleshy edible part of the fruit, and the endocarp, which forms the inner stony wall or layer of the fruit that surrounds the seed. So next, moving on to the other layers, which is the actual seed. From where is the fruit developed? It is developed, or from where is the pericarp developed? It is developed from the ovary, and the seed is developed from the ovule. And when we look at a seed, the seed has three important parts, that is the embryo. So embryo, it is actually the region which develops into the shoot from the plumule and the root from the radicle respectively. It is nothing but the baby plant. So as you can see here, embryo is the baby plant, and then comes the endosperm. So the endosperm is the reserved food. So this endosperm, actually it provides nutrition to the developing embryo. So the endosperm should always be formed before the embryo itself. Why? Because the embryo, they cannot photosynthesize on their own, and they cannot synthesize food or use food or derive nutrition. Therefore, they take the help of the endosperm in order to derive nutrition. Why? Because the endosperm in the seed is filled with nutrient substances or food material that acts as a nutrient source for the embryo. And next comes the seed coat. So outside the seed is present a hard layer which is called as the seed coat. So this is about the fruit. And next coming to the coconut. So there is a difference between the coconut fruit, the layers present in the coconut fruit and the layers of the or the parts of a mango fruit. So both coconut and mango, they are drupes. They are called as drupe. Why? Because they produce a stony structure. That is why they call it as a drupe. And the coconut, it has a outer skin, that is the exocarp, and it has a mesocarp, and it has a endocarp. So the outer skin is the exocarp. So below the exocarp is present the mesocarp, which is nothing but the husk of the coconut. So the covering or the husk of the coconut is nothing but the mesocarp. So next comes the endocarp. So endocarp also here it is stony. Why? Because it is made up of shell. Even the endocarp of mango is also stony. That is the seed that covers the mango is also stony. That is endocarp. Similarly in coconut also the shell is or the endocarp, it is stony. That is why it is called as a drupe. Next comes the endosperm. So endosperm is the kernel, that is the fleshy part. So here also the fleshy part was called as the mesocarp, similarly like that, but here the fleshy part is the kernel or the endosperm. So this is the structure of the seed. That is, the seed is made up of an embryo, endosperm and the seed coat, and overall these are the different parts of a fruit. So next, moving on to studying the seed in detail. So the seed are nothing but those are once the ovule fertilized. So what happens to the female stigma? From the male anther, the pollens will come and sit on the female stigma. It will produce the pollen tube, and through the pollen tube the male gametes will be delivered into the ovule, and the ovule are the ones which form the seed. So the ovules after fertilization, they actually develop into the seeds. So the seed is made up of a seed coat and an embryo. So when you see a seed, outer to the seed is present the seed coat. So the seed coat is also again made up of testa and the tegmen. So the seed coat is the one which protects the inner endosperm and the embryo that is present in the seed. So it is made up of a seed coat, and also inner to the seed coat the embryo is present. So embryo is present inner to the seed coat of the seed. And next there is an embryonal axis present in the seed. So the embryo is made up of a radicle and an embryonal axis. Why? Because it is from the embryo that the plumule will form and the radicle will form, and from the plumule the shoot will arise, and from the radicle the root will arise. So therefore the embryo is made up of a radicle and an embryonal axis. And also in seed there are two types. One is monocotyledon and the other one is dicotyledon. So monocotyledon is wherein they have only one cotyledon, as in the case of wheat and maize, or some seeds may have two cotyledons, as in the case of gram and pea. So these are the different examples of the monocotyledon and the dicotyledon seed. So this is the general structure of the seed. So next, moving on to studying in detail the structure of the dicotyledonous seed. So dicotyledonous seed again is made up of the seed coat. So the seed coat is the outer covering. It forms a coat, or it forms a protective layer. It is the outer covering, and it has a hilum. So now what is this hilum? So hilum is nothing but a scar. So a scar left by the placenta. So if this is the ovary, so here we have the stigma, then this is the ovary. So in the ovary, you know that the ovules are present, and these are the ovules that get converted into a seed, right? So when the ovule matures into a seed, it will detach itself from the placenta. So that region where it detaches, so this is the placenta. So placenta, it is the structure which holds the ovule inside the ovary, or it forms a connectivity between the ovary and the ovule or in the locule. So that is the nothing but placenta. So this placenta actually when the ovule matures into a seed, it will detach itself from the placenta. So when it detaches itself from the placenta, a small scar will be left wherein the placenta is being connected. So that particular region is called as the hilum. And next is one more part is called as the micropyle. So micropyle, as I told you, say for example the pollen grain falls on the stigma, then it produces the pollen tube and the stigma enters somewhere through here. So through which region? That is through the opening present in the ovule, it will enter. That particular opening is called as the micropyle. And that micropylar opening, so if you keenly observe a seed, you can find a small pin-sized hole in the seed. That is nothing but the micropylar opening that is left behind on the seed coat. So these are the different structures of the seed coat. So and dicotyledonous seed, they have two cotyledons. So cotyledon 1 and cotyledon 2. And apart from having two cotyledons, they have the plumule and the radicle. So the plumule is present in the upper portion of the seed and it gives rise to the shoot. Shoot and the leaf development takes place through the plumule and the radicle gives rise to the root. So the root and the root development. So the root development takes place through the radicle. So these are the, and also cotyledons, they play a very important role. Why? Because the cotyledon protects this particular region of the plumule and the radicle in a younger seed. So that is why they act as a protective structure as well. That is the cotyledon. So this is the structure of a dicotyledonous seed. So bean, almost all the Fabaceae, the Papilionaceae members, that is the bean family, they all come under the dicotyledons. So next, moving on to the structure of the monocotyledons. So monocotyledon seeds, they have a endosperm. So endosperm, why is it needed? Because in order to provide nutrition to the embryo, the endosperm is needed. So the endosperm provides enough sufficient nutrition to the embryo. Then comes the endosperm and the embryo. So the embryo, and one more feature of the monocotyledon is that it cannot be cut into two equal halves. Only one cotyledon is present, and in that cotyledon it has the endosperm and the embryo being present. So in the embryo there is again the radicle and the plumal region which gives rise to the root and the shoot respectively. So next, moving on to the section of the seed. So when a longitudinal section of a seed is taken, we can find that in the seed there is presence of the endosperm. So this endosperm actually provides nourishment to this particular region wherein the radicle and the plumule is being present. And apart from that, it also has a layer called as the aleuron layer. So this aleuron layer actually is filled with fatty substances and oils which also provides nourishment to the developing embryo. And apart from that, there is a region called as the scutellum and also a region called as the coleoptile. So coleoptile, if you see, they are placed just above the plumule. So the main function of the coleoptile is to support the plumule or to provide protection to the plumule. So from the plumule, the shoot develops, and then from the radicle the root develops, and there is one more structure called as the coleorhiza. So the coleoptile, it is a protective covering of the plumule, and the coleorhiza is a protective covering of the radicle region. So because the plumule and the radicle, they are very important for the shoot and the root development, and they are very, very fragile, or they are still weak or very young. So in order to protect them, these are used. So this is about dicotyledonous seeds. So next, moving on to some of the semi-technical terms that are used in order to describe a plant. What are those? We shall see. So before assigning, like how you had studied in the previous chapters, that whenever a name is given to a particular plant or an animal species, according to the binomial nomenclature, certain rules have to be followed, right? Just like that, even when giving a technical description to some plant or organism, say for example, if you want to describe corolla, you want to give a short form or you want to give a symbol to it. So when you have to do that, then certain rules has to be followed. What are those rules? So we shall first look into what those rules are. So rules are based on the morphological features. So, based on morphological features only, the description or a symbol for a plant can be given. So, morphological features are used to describe a plant. Say for example, if I am talking about the calyx, I can write it as K or something else. So, a particular. So, K will depict the morphology of the plant. Morphology of what? Maybe the corolla. So, that is how. So next is the description has to be brief. Say for example, if I say zygomorphic. So say if I write for zygomorphic like this, then means it can be cut into equal planes. So that is zygomorphic. So zygomorphic, if I mention it like this, then it should have a very short description. That is, this means you should be able to understand it is zygomorphic like that. So the description has to be brief, and it has to be simple, and it has to be in a scientific language, not writing the symbol and stating that the plant can be cut into equal halves in different planes. No, it will be wrong. You have to just put the symbol and state that it is zygomorphic. So it has to be very, very brief, and it should be scientific, because telling the word zygomorphic means it is something scientific here. So scientific language should be used, and it should be presented in a proper sequence. And also one more rule is that the plant is described beginning with its habit. So the description of the plant should be done based on habit, that is based on where it is growing, what is the condition of that particular area, which environment it is growing, all that, and based on the vegetative characters. So based on the vegetative characters such as the roots, the stem and the leaves, and also the floral characters such as the inflorescence. So I told you, cymose, if it is cymose, there might be a different symbol. If it is racemose, there might be a different symbol. So position of the flower. So when you describe a plant, it is difficult to write each and everything again and again. Like how in computer languages you have certain shortcut symbols, right? Or when you're texting, you have some symbols, like you have emojis which depicts the emotion. Instead of just typing the emotion, if you just put that emoji, you will understand that person is what the person who has sent you a message is feeling. Just like that, in order to depict the character of a plant, symbols are being used. So here the symbols are being used. First of all, the description of the habit, the vegetative characters, the roots, that is the roots, the stem, leaves, and then the floral characters, everything should be described. And also the inflorescence and the flower parts, everything should be described when giving semi-technical description of a flowering plant. Next, after describing what you need to do. So after describing the various parts of a plant, a floral diagram should be drawn, and also a floral formula should be presented. And one more thing, I had told you here the description should be simple and scientific. So if I write, it has the leaf is stipulate, means the leaf has stipule. If it is stipulate, means the leaf does not have stipule. Petiolate, then the leaf has a petiole. Epetiolate or expetiolate, the leaf doesn't have a petiole. Like this, simple descriptions will be given to the plant. So all these descriptions also have their own respective symbols. So after describing various parts of a plant, the floral diagram should be drawn. So once you look at the floral diagram, you can understand where the calyx is present, how many calyx is present, whether the calyx is united, or whether it is gamosepalous or whether it is polysepalous. Likewise, coming to the flower, that is the corolla or the petal, whether it is gamopetalous, how many flowers or petals are there, whether they are polypetalous or whether they have a vexillary estivation. So all that you will come to know. And finally, after putting the floral diagram, based on the floral diagram, you have to put the floral formula. So we shall study now about the semi-technical description of a typical flowering plant using a floral diagram and a floral formula. So in your coming sessions also, you will be studying about how the plants are described, and for that plant, how the floral diagram has been put and how the floral formula has been put. So before going to that, you should know a general floral diagram, how it is drawn, and also you should know how the floral formula, what are the different symbols in a floral formula means. So we shall first start with the floral diagram. So the floral diagram, this is the axis. So what is represented here? It is the axis. So here even I can write it as like this. It means the flower is, so you can see here this symbol is there. So what does it mean? It means the flower is actinomorphic. So actinomorphic flower. So actinomorphic flower means the flower can be cut into equal halves in any plane. In any plane you can cut it into equal halves. So that is actinomorphic. And next comes this particular symbol. So what does this mean? By looking at the floral diagram, you can see the androecium as well as the gynoecium is present. So the male is represented like this, right? And the female is represented like this. But together it will be, because the male and the female reproductive parts are present in one flower itself, it will be together represented like this. So that is the symbol. Next, they have written as K2 plus 2. So what is K here? K means calyx. N is the number of calyx. What is calyx? The sepals, right? So how many sepals are there here? There are 1, 2, 3, 4 sepals. But now you can ask me, ma'am, they could have written it as 4, right? But they have written it as 2 plus 2 because 2 is inside and the other 2 is outside. That is why they have written it as 2 plus 2. 2 sepals are completely outside. Can you see here? They are completely outside, these two. And these two are completely inside. That is why they have written it as 2 plus 2. And next, moving on to the K is for calyx. Next, moving on to C. C is for corolla. So corolla, again, how many petals are there? How many petals are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, 4 petals are there. They have written it as 4 petals as it is. Next, A. A stands for androecium, the male reproductive part. So, how many anthers are there? So, how many anthers? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Again, they have written it as 2 plus 4. Why 2 plus 2? 2 plus 4, 1. Can you see here? 5 and 2 is completely outside. So, 2 anthers are completely outside. That is why 2 and rest 4 anthers. Maybe the facing of the anther, whether they are facing towards the flower or whether they are facing away from the flower or away from the gynoecium, based on that. So, it is 2 plus 4. Next, moving on to the gynoecium. So, gynoecium, if you observe here, there is a small line is drawn below the G. So, what does it mean? So, G stands for gynoecium. So, a small line drawn below the G means it has superior ovary. That is, rest all the flowers start from the base and the gynoecium is at the top. That is, the ovary is at the top. That is what it means here. The flower has a superior ovary. So, from where will you get all these? That is by looking at the flower. So, first you need to observe the calyx. You have to count how many calyx are there. Then you have to see whether the calyx is fused or whether it is free. So, say for example, if it is fused, you can draw a line here. So, this means it is fused. So, if I draw a line here, it means it is fused. They are fused. So, this is about the fused calyx. If it is free, just like that, as earlier how the diagram was, you can leave it like that. And next, moving on to, you have to observe the corolla next. Next, corolla, you have to see how the petals are arranged. How many petals are there, the number of petals. And again, if that is also fused, you have to draw a different diagram. So, you can draw it like this. If it is fused, it will be drawn like this. So, they are fused. The petals are fused with each other. Or if it is free, as earlier as it was shown. Next, androecium. You'll go in for counting the number of anthers. How many anthers are present? Again, in how many anthers are present? How many anthers are facing away from the ovary or facing towards the ovary? So, if this is the gynoecium, how many are facing towards the ovary? How many are inside or how many are towards the external side? So, that you'll have to count. If there is no internal and external side, if they're present in one single whorl itself, then fine, you can just write it as the number. That is enough. Next, moving on to the gynoecium. Again, gynoecium, you have to see whether the ovary is superior or not. So, if the ovary is superior means the ovary will be here and all the other parts of the flower will arise from the base of the ovary. So, therefore, the ovary will be at the top position. The ovary is superior. So, because the ovary is superior, we are putting a line here and drawing ovary at the top, means it is superior to this one. So, therefore, here again it is written as in bracket and it is written 2. So, whenever bracket comes, it means they are fused. Okay. So, the carpels, how many carpels are there here? two carpels are there. So therefore two gynoeciums, so two carpel, therefore it is written 2 and it is fused. They are fused with each other. That is why a bracket is drawn. So this is about the floral diagram. So likewise, other families, say for example, we have Liliaceae. By looking at the flower, we can draw the floral diagram and then come to a conclusion about the floral formula. So next, moving on to the floral formula, as I told you, there are certain symbols which we have to keep in mind. So BR. So BR is a short form for bracteate flower. So those flowers having a bract. What is a bract? The leaf-like structures or reduced leaf-like structures that arise from the base of the flower or the pedicel is called as the bract. So in the previous session, I had given you the example of hibiscus and datura. So hibiscus was bracteate. Datura was ebracteate, did not have the bract. So BR means it is bracteate flower. EBR means the bract is absent. That is why ebracteate. Ebracteate means bract is absent. So bract is absent for EBR. Then comes K. I told you corolla and calyx both starts from C. So to avoid confusion, calyx, they have given the letter K for calyx and C for corolla. So K means calyx. Again here, how many? N means number. So how many number of calyx are there? Are there 2, 4, 6, 8 like that? How many numbers are there? You have to count the number. So if it is 6, you'll just write it as K6. Again, say for example, 6 calyx are there and all the calyx, that is the sepals, are fused. So if it is fused, you'll write K, you'll write the number 6 and you will put it in a bracket, means all they are fused. And if they are free, you'll just write it like this. They are not fused. Just write the number, no bracket, nothing. And next, moving on to gamosepalous. So this is wrong. This is polysepalous calyx. So K means calyx. Kn is how many calyx is there, how many sepals are there, and polysepalous calyx. So this is just Kn. So polysepalous means they are not fused. So it is K6. Next, moving on to gamosepalous calyx. So gamosepalous calyx, as I told you, there are 6 calyx. If there are 6 calyx, we will be writing it as K6, and because it is gamosepalous, gamo means fusion, sepalous means sepals. So fusion is there, it is put in a bracket. So that is how it is written. Next, moving on to the inner whorl. That is, so whorl by whorl we shall study the flower. So next, moving on to the inner whorl. Which is the inner whorl? It is the corolla, that is the petal. So C stands for corolla. Next, if it is polypetalous, like if more than one petal is present, it will be Cn. Or if the petals are free, that is they are not fused, it will be Cn. Say for example, there are 5 petals, it will be C5 like this. And gamopetalous, so I'll write 5 petals are there, and if it is fused, I'll put it within a bracket, that is gamopetalous. Next, moving on to P. P is for perianth. So what is perianth? So in some of the families, say for example, champaka flowers. So in champaka flowers, if you look at the flower, you cannot distinguish between the petal and the calyx because both will look like the same. Even the calyx will also be orange color. In such cases, it is considered to be the perianth. So if perianth is present, it will be represented by the symbol P. And if androecium is there, it will be represented by A. So gynoecium, it is G. Gynoecium is G, then ovary. Coming on to the ovary. Now you can ask me, they could have written O, right? But why didn't they write it O? Because ovary is a part of the gynoecium. So what they have done is, for superior ovary, they have written it as G. So this is other parts of the flower. The line that I have drawn means the other parts of the flower. So other parts of the flower are arising from the base of the ovary. So therefore, ovary superior, G is at the top. So that is how it is represented. Now if the ovary is inferior, so all the other parts of the flower are arising above the ovary and the ovary is present at the base of it. So therefore, it is inferior ovary. So it is inferior ovary and it is being represented by First a line and then at the bottom of the line G. Next, moving on to male flower. So male flower is represented by this symbol and the female flower by this. So we all know about it. Next, moving on to bisexual flowers. The example which I gave here. If both the male and the female reproductive structures are present in the same flower, then it is considered to be bisexual flower. Here two sexes are present in the same flower. Therefore, it is bisexual flower. So, it is bisexual flowers. This is the symbol. Then moving on to actinomorphic. If the flowers can be cut into equal halves, it is called as actinomorphic, be it radial symmetry or bilateral symmetry. So, it is called as actinomorphic. Then, if the flower cannot be cut into two equal halves, it is called as zygomorphic, which is represented by a percentage symbol like this. So, these are the different symbols, and all these symbols itself will be used in the floral formula. So, first, if you need to put the floral formula, first you need to hold a flower in your hand, then you have to study the structure of the flower, draw the floral diagram, and then looking into the floral diagram, the floral formula can be put easily. So, this is about the semi-technical description of a typical flowering plant, wherein we describe the flower by using the floral diagram and using the symbols for different characters or parts of the flower. So, this was about today's session. So, I hope you understood today's session, wherein we studied the post-fertilization structures. That is, in a flower, the post-fertilization structures are the seeds, the fruit and all that. So, what are the different parts of a seed, how many types of seeds are present, and what are the parts of a fruit, all that we studied. And we also studied how the description of a family of a flowering plant is done, and what are the different symbols that are being used to describe a plant, and how to draw and how a floral diagram is actually drawn. And when drawing the floral diagram also, the sepals will always be represented in this form, and the petals in this, and the anthers in a butterfly shape. Because the anthers, why it is represented in this form? Because I told you, when you take a cross section of the anther, inside what will be there? Microsporangia. And how will the microsporangia look? As if it looks like a 4-chamber, and in the 4-chamber the pollen sacs will be present, right? So, therefore, the anthers are represented like this, because it is representing the microsporangia. And next, representation of the ovary. So, ovary also, again, can you see here, they have drawn basal placentation. So, placentation can be basal placentation. So, these are the placentations can also be drawn. So, this is about the floral diagram. So, I hope you understood the session well. In the coming session, that is the last session of this particular chapter, that is Morphology of Flowering Plants, we shall study the description of different families, that is Liliaceae, Solanaceae and Fabaceae, and what are the characteristic features of those families, the vegetative characters as well as the floral characters, and how based on the characters the floral diagrams are drawn for these families, and what is the floral formula that is being used. We shall meet in the next coming session. Thank you.